Hi, this is the first of 3 videos we have for you on dockets. In this video, we're going to talk a little bit about what dockets and the underlying filings are and why you might use them for legal research. I'm going to quickly show you, recommend a source for you, a web guide, and then a couple of sources where you might be able to get mass dockets and a few underlying filings that are not subscription. So what is a docket? Well, this is a little piece of a docket, and I've copied just some of the information from it. You can see it lists the court that it's in this case, a U.S. District Court in the Northern District of Illinois, the party names, the docket number, and then this actually had a lot more entries, but these are the first few entries, and I think by looking at this, you can see that a docket is basically a list of everything that's happened in a case. So for example, this starts with the complaint and the civil cover sheet that were filed. If I had copied more of it, you'd see there were answers, even things are entered into the record like filing fees and appearances. So when you hear somebody talk about pleadings or filings, what does that mean? Well, those are the documents that are actually filed by the attorneys in a case. So the complaint, the motions, the answers, any kind of paperwork that you might file as an attorney in a case. And these are the ones at the trial court level, obviously the pleadings. And when we're talking at the appeals court level, you have briefs, obviously. So why would you be doing research in the dockets or looking for underlying pleadings? Well, the first is case status. So if you're involved in a case and you want to see if attorneys on the other side have filed something or the judge has rendered a decision on something that you're filed, then you might want to look at the case status, right? The second reason is competitive intelligence. So if you wanted to look up, you're appearing before a judge and you want to see how they've ruled in similar cases, you can look up the underlying filings to see how the judges have interpreted certain motions, for example. Or you might want to look and see the pleadings that your opposing counsel have filed in similar cases. So that might be another reason that you do competitive intelligence. Or say you had a client that you were working for who was suing another company. You might want to look to see if they've been involved in other suits. So that's another competitive intelligence reason. The final reason and why we're talking about dockets with forms is that for all of those materials that are filed with the courts, we might be able to use those as samples for our own drafting. So caveats or concerns. So the first one is coverage. So for dockets, we can usually find the dockets online. But for online availability in terms of the underlying filings or pleadings, that might be a little limited depending on what court we're looking for. At the federal trial court level, we can go back maybe about 10 years and get filings, not just the docket sheet, but also look at the underlying filings, so the complaints and the motions. At the state level, we can get some of the dockets, but the underlying filings are often only available by going to the courthouse or by paying a courier to go to the courthouse. The other concern that I want to point out to you is when you're drafting. So keep in mind that if you're using a pleading as an example with your own drafting, it's only as skillful as the attorney who drafts it. So you're definitely going to want to look at it with a critical eye. So like secondary sources and forms, do your own research and modify what you're drafting. Okay, this is the web guide I wanted to suggest, and it's on the Boston College Law Library site. Under the Law Library, they have a number of libguides, and this is the one on dockets and court filing research, and I've given you the URL in that little box. And what this is good for is it tells you where to start your docket research, the coverage of various databases, including free sources of law. And since we're so limited in Massachusetts for the underlying filings, it gives you an idea of what you might expect to find on the web. You can always go to the courthouse, of course, but what you're going to get sitting at your desk might be a little limited. Okay, so I promised you a couple of free sites. So this is the one for the state appellate court, so the Supreme Judicial Court and the Appeals Court of Massachusetts, and there is availability for the dockets here for both of those courts. There's not really much in terms of the briefs for the appeals court, but you can get the most of the SJC briefs back to about 2007. And for state trial courts, they have a website, the e-access website, and I gave you the URL here. And there's some availability to get electronic access to the dockets. And you can also register as an attorney and get an increased level of access to this system. But there's not much in terms of the underlying filings, at least electronically. As I said before, you can go to the courthouse and get them, but not as much availability remotely. Okay, the final thing I want to talk about, even though this is a mass specific class, is PACER, because sometimes you're, even when you're practicing mass law, you're practicing it in front of a judge in the U.S. district courts or the U.S. appellate courts. So the website, the free website or free-ish website that we use is called Pacer. I say free-ish because they do charge cost per page when you print something or when you pull something up, with a minimum cost per document. It's very minimum though, so it's not free, but it's very reasonable, I should say. And it's the federal filing system as well. So if you have a federal case, you might have on the attorney side a slightly different look to it, where you're actually filing papers electronically, but we can also search it from the consumer side and get access to dockets and underlying filings. One caveat on PACER is you're going to have to look at your individual court's public access to court electronic records site. So you're going to have to look in Massachusetts, for example, at the District Court for Massachusetts. And this is the main PACER page, and it has some guidance on how to search for PACER and links to all those courts. So as academics, we're more likely to use a very similar source on Bloomberg Law, where they pull in all these filings and dockets from PACER, because for us as academics, that's free. But in a law firm, you most likely will be using this PACER, or it's also called the CM ECF system, so the case management, case filing system.